plants that you've got here and seen the beginning really of the modern industrial food system and that inspiring place on the Mississippi, and sampling the progressive mood here. So one of the interesting things, if you take a cab, you often will meet people from Somalia. And then when I find out I'm from Toronto, well, they all got a cousin or a brother or somebody. And the interesting thing is they all say, well, they came to Minneapolis because it's such a progressive city. That's a pretty cool thing, and that's a real guarantee of the future of this city, I believe. I've only spent 4 days here, and I don't want to be an ugly Canadian and tell you what to do. We used to think we did pretty well in terms of prime ministers relative to how you did with presidents. But now we say the difference between our prime minister and Sarah Palin is lipstick. I'm a bit envious of you, but so I'd just like to ask you to consider 4 things that we've done in Toronto that I think I'm looking forward to us being sister cities and working on this together. The first is that you consider adopting a homegrown, made in Minneapolis food charter. Okay, we have one in Toronto, which I wrote about 6 years ago, unanimously supported by City Council. And you need to start off, I believe, with a unifying experience. Whether you're young or old, or rich or poor, immigrant or descendant of the Mayflower, right or left wing, everyone can come behind the food cause. Because here's how we started off, is that we said, let's backcast, like, where do you want to be in 20 years? What's your vision of this city and where food will be in this city in 20 years? And amazingly, there is not any significant disagreement. There isn't anybody who says, you know what, maybe in 20 years, poor kids will be a little bit smarter when they're picking their parents. They'll make sure they pick somebody with high income. Or it helps build character for the poor to go without food while they're going to school. There is a common vision of what a good society and a good food system will be like, and that's how you start, because, as it says in an important book on the subject of food, without a vision, the people will perish. And so we need to start off with a common vision that we can touch. Does not mean that we will reach it today or tomorrow or in a year, but I work for the Food Policy Council, and our job is to help the city implement that vision so that we can get there in 20 years if need be, or maybe a bit faster. And when you go through that process, what you will find is that there are many things that a city can do about food. Normally, when we think of what can be done, what governments can do about food, we think of the federal and the state level. But increasingly, we are finding that cities are the source of great power and of great partnerships, above all, with the citizens. So one of the things about food is that it is inherently empowering. When you realize there's something wrong, then you exercise your power to boycott, not to boycott, but to deliberately buy something positive that expresses your values. And then you look to buy from a farmer's market. Well, then you're in connection with your city, because the city can help with that. And I see you've got fair trade very prominently supported here. In Europe, the runaway movement is supported by over 200 cities, is that cities are supporting fair trade, because we not only support fair trade with our farmers, but the food producers around the world. And so the city can play a really critical role. I think you do here, as we do in Toronto. The city contributes to signage to say, here are good community gardens and farmers markets. Small thing, but an important thing, a bit of a blessing, a bit of grace. Community gardens, the foyer of City Hall, we try to use that for food art exhibits, for farmers markets, for World Food Day celebrations. The city can issue food guides to convention delegates who are coming here every week to say, here's the places to sample. You want to taste Minneapolis? Here's where to go. So in other words, we can get a real sense of the power that we exercise. Second, I'd ask you to consider having a food policy council. In Toronto, we have one with 30 citizens, and they provide the best information that the city can get access to from people who have a profound experience in the problems and, above all, the solutions that the range of people in the city experience. And you also get a very special experience, because when you look at the whole enchilada of food, you recognize that what governments have done is to split food into 101 parts. There's a nutrition part, and there's a safety part, And then there's another part that doesn't get any name, but it's called waste. And over 1/3 of what we call waste, or what is in fact a mismanaged resource, is from the food system. And so actually food hits us in hundreds of ways, but governments are only recognizing a very small number, and they're always separating them. But what you have with the Food Council is the discipline to say, let's look at this whole thing together, because the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. And that's where the magic of a Food Policy Council comes from. And I consider it to be akin to the power of Mary Poppins. Okay, because what Mary Poppins did is she came into a totally dysfunctional family, but actually everyone in that family was fine. And that once she did her magic, all she did was her magic, and the same family was very healthy and happy. And that's what a Food Policy Council can do when it sees the magic of the whole enchilada. So third, I would encourage you to work with the power you have rather than complain about the power you don't have. The food is about the power of one to make a difference, and then we widen the circle through farmers markets and fair trade, and we just keep widening and widening. And we go from boycotts right on up. In the City of Toronto, the Food Policy Council helped establish an organization called Local Food Plus, which you can check out on the web. The University of Toronto is the biggest campus in North America, 80,000 students, and they are now the biggest order for local and sustainably produced food in the world. Okay, and they start, our motto is continuous improvement. Not the perfect is the enemy of the good, which has been our slogan for too long. So we start with 10%, then 15%, and this year it's 20%, local and sustainable food. And you know, you want to think about the power you have. Universities and community colleges, if you would put them all together across North America, is the 26th biggest economic power in the world. You almost could have made it to the G20. And so, in other words, we want to think of the power we have, and we want to think in terms of solutions, not complaints. And I think you got a great mayor from the little bit I've experienced who can help you in that. Fourth, you guys are better than that. Be of good cheer. We are about positive energy. Okay, and we need to overcome the stereotype that we're about complaining and doomsaying and the rest. We're about solutions. And what food is, the magic of food is that it's about win-win-win solutions. Take breastfeeding. Good for the baby, emotionally and physically in terms of their brain capacity, and also it's now been established good for fighting obesity. Good for the mom's health. Good for the environment. You don't have to heat it. You don't have to travel to the drugstore in the middle of the night. 2 convenient locations right near you. And you save money doing it. Okay. Community gardens, the same thing. We found, we actually the city got into community gardens as an issue of safety. And so women who were jogging in parks early in the morning or later in the evening were being harassed. Well, when are gardeners out there? Early in the morning and later in the evening. So they're eyes on the street that provide safety. We call them automated police. And so it's good for reducing the food miles that food has to travel. It's good for teaching food literacy and for engaging people with nature, which we desperately need. We're suffering from what's called nature deficit disorder. Rooftop gardens. They pay for themselves just by keeping the rainwater, what city planners call stormwater, out of the sewage system for a day, and stopping that flash flood that causes you to have all sorts of problems. They also reduce the heat island effect, because when that old rain goes up as evaporation, it cools the area around it by about 5 degrees. It muffles noise, and it provides free food. Okay, I call it free food because it's already paid for itself many times over before we got to the food production. So it's always win-win-win. And I want to point out, by the way, that the local sustainable food thing at the University of Toronto, it costs 10% more to buy that food, but they actually do it for exactly the same cost as before, because the people working in food production now have the respect for the food, that they're not wasting it, and they're paying for the extra that they give to the farmers through reducing their waste. So we're looking at a great future, and I wish you the best. Thank you very much.